Hi, I'm Matt Jones. Arkansas is on the verge of winning a conference title for the first time in 17 years and a division title for the third year in a row. On this week's WholeHog Baseball Podcast, we talk with Kendall Rogers of D1Baseball.com about the final week in the SEC and the NCAA's change to allow full capacity for the postseason. Jeff Cardozo of the Florida Baseball Radio Network also joins us to preview the Gators. Seth Campbell and I give our thoughts from this week in Arkansas baseball. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Massage Envy has been voted the best day spa and best massage in all of Northwest Arkansas. Great therapists and estheticians go along with a new service that I am truly excited about. Rapid Tension Relief uses a special tool that will melt the tension and soreness away. Trust me, you will not be disappointed in the results. I highly recommend this feature along with a total body stretch assisted stretch program. Whether you are competing at a high level or just want to relax, these services are for everyone. Massage, rapid tension relief, total body stretch, deep muscle treatment massage, you choose. Or you can try any combination of those. So the next time you're feeling tight, make sure to call my friends at Massage Envy.
This is the WholeHog Baseball Podcast, presented by Massage Envy, the only podcast devoted entirely to Arkansas baseball. Now, here's Matt Jones and Seth Campbell.
There's a lot going on in Razorback baseball this week. Arkansas has a chance to win the conference championship over Florida at Baum-Walker Stadium. It's the first time this year that there's going to be full capacity at the stadium. Big news coming out Wednesday that full capacity is going to be allowed for NCAA baseball regionals and super regionals in the College World Series. Kendall Rogers of D1Baseball.com will be on here in just a moment to help us kind of break that down. Of course, you had the Tennessee series. Arkansas beat Tennessee in a matchup of the two top SEC teams, and then you had that really bizarre ending where Dave Van Horn and Tony Vitello got into it just a little bit on the field. So there is a lot to unpack this week on the WholeHog Baseball Podcast. I'm Matt Jones. Seth Campbell will join me here in just a moment, but first we're going to go to Kendall Rogers. And whenever I asked Kendall today if he was going to have time to come on the podcast, I didn't know he was going to break the biggest story of the year. But Kendall, we appreciate you taking some time out of your busy day for us. Big news today that the NCAA is going to announce that if local guidelines allow, teams can have full capacity at their baseball parks for regional, super regionals. And I would assume this would extend to Omaha as well if Omaha allows full capacity.
No, it does. And I think this is great news. I think with NCAA, and what's actually kind of backtrack a little bit, what's really interesting is I actually kind of asked somebody a couple weeks ago, like, hey, do you think the NCAA is going to come off of this? And, my source said, I really don't think so. They've had to do this with some other sports. I just don't think they're going to do it. Well, once MLB and once the ACC and some of these other leagues and teams started allowing full capacity, I think the NCAA took a step back and said, listen, like, all these other people are doing it. We're staying at 50. Like, let's just give these schools an opportunity to, A, get more fans, make the experience better for the student athlete, but also, hey, by the way, we can make more revenue. So I think it's kind of a double-edged sword on what they want here. I think it's great news. It's going to be regional supers, Omaha. I can tell you, I was talking to a couple of people, with ties to the city council in Omaha, and they're just ecstatic. They lost the College World Series last year, and that was about a $30 to $40 million loss for that city. And so to not only get it back, but now get it 100% capacity back, that's a really, really big deal to a city that, frankly, a lot of us hold pretty dear to our hearts, especially there in Fayetteville with the number of fans that have been up there for the CWS.
Yeah, I was reading Evan Bland's story today in the World Herald. He said that it's the financial impact of the World Series in Omaha is about $70 million a year.
Yeah, it's incredible. And to think they didn't have that, there's a chance they wouldn't have they didn't have the swim trials because there was obviously no Summer Olympics. Mm-hmm. And so they lost all of that. But thankfully they'll get both back this year. So I think it's awesome news. And certainly, I know Arkansas has had plenty of fans at games, but there's just nothing better than postseason baseball, and there's certainly very, very few things, if any, better than postseason baseball at Baum Stadium. And this team deserves it. This team deserves to have a packed house for their run potentially to Omaha.
Hunter Yurachek told me last week, and then I think he said this earlier this week too, that basically he's put in a call just about every week to John Cohen, who's on the D1 baseball committee, about getting this capacity, changed. Getting the cap on attendance changed for the regionals, and basically what he said was that in the SEC we've handled things really well locally, and so the NCAA should allow local guidance to take precedent. But like you mentioned earlier, the NCAA is not really one to make the most obvious calls, and so it didn't feel like this was going to change. And so I think when you reported that this morning, it kind of came out of left field for a lot of people.
No, it did. I'll be honest with you. Like everyone I talked to leading up to today said that is not going to happen. They're not going to back off of it. And so, I don't know who kind of flipped the switch for that. I don't know if it's MLB, committing to it with a lot of venues going 100%, or whether it was the ACC. I do know, I can't tell you, there was a lot of pressure, and you kind of alluded to with Hunter, but there was a lot of pressure from member schools to increase attendance. If you look at COVID, everybody says, right, follow the science. But when you look at COVID, like the outdoor spread of COVID is extremely minimal. So I think people view the risk as pretty low. And, now that a lot of states have been very good about vaccinating, there's no reason not to have 100% for an outdoor venue. I think that the argument against it for an indoor venue, probably a little more plausible.
Let's talk about this weekend series. Arkansas hosts Florida. The Razorbacks can win the SEC outright. They could also get a share of the title. They could be passed by some teams depending on how the weekend goes. What are your thoughts as we go into this series? Obviously, Florida is on a pretty good run here lately, but of course Arkansas is too. How do these two teams stack up?
Yeah, this is fascinating, isn't it? You look at Florida, the team that came into the year, preseason number one against Arkansas, the team that's been number one for a couple months now. And, we'll find out. I think we'll find out a lot about Florida. I think we know everything we need to know about Arkansas. I think for Arkansas, it's all about continuing to play at a high level, continue to try to establish even more consistency with the week rotation. I think for Florida, though, this is a huge, huge weekend. The Gators right now are still in the teens in terms of seeding. But I tell you what, if they can win the series, at Arkansas this weekend, they've got a really good shot to get in the top 8 mix. And frankly, if they won that series and then played well in Hoover, I think they would be a top 8. So Florida has a lot to play for, but certainly Arkansas doesn't want to lose a series to the Gators. So I think it's going to be a well-played series. I think the thing for me to keep an eye on is Florida defensively. If you look at Josh Rivera and Nathan Hickey, they have not been very stable defensively this year, whereas I look at the Hogs and they have been very stable. If Florida doesn't play defense, it's going to be a long weekend in Fayetteville. If they do, they can beat anybody in the country, and that's kind of what the series boils down to.
Are we at the point where it feels like the number one national seed has been locked up, or do you think there are some teams, maybe a Vanderbilt, a Texas, someone like that could still take that spot away from Arkansas?
No, they're locked in. Right now, Aaron Fitt and I were just having this discussion the other day. Even if Arkansas lost the series and somehow didn't win the SEC regular season title, they're still the number one overall national seed. When you look at a team that has not had a losing weekend in the Southeastern Conference, they've been as dominant as they have been on the road. I just don't see how you look at the metrics, especially the road metrics, and go, they should be the number one seed. I just don't know what your pitch would be to dispute that. So I think right now, I think they're the slam dunk number one national seed, and it kind of leads you into next week, right? If you're Dave Van Horn, and let's say you win the Florida series, I hate to say it, but if you're DVH, you're almost like, hey, let's play 2 games and go home. It sounds really weird, but South Carolina, if you remember, did that 2 straight years, went 0-2, and they won the national championship both years. So. It's very interesting to see how DVH kind of strategizes things next week. I think you could see a situation where maybe Wicklander or a guy like that maybe doesn't even see the mound. I think he's going to rest guys if he can.
Yeah, there's always been a thought around here that Van Horn didn't really care too much for Hoover. Now he diplomatically he'll say we want to win Hoover, but I think everybody knows that he's more concerned about getting into Omaha a few weeks after. I wanted to ask you about being a number one national seed. Do you think that the selection committee, do you think they try to protect the 1 seed? Do you think that maybe they get the I know we don't do seedings for past the number 1 seeds, but do you think that there's any type of thought where do they get the 32nd best team as the number 2 seed in the regional? How does that work?
No, not really. I mean, I do think that you tend to get a really, really weak 4th seed, but really after that, outside of the 4th seed, I think it all boils down to kind of geography. And, the only time I've ever seen a number 1 seed get outrageously easy regionals that year, I think it was 17, when Oregon State went I don't know, what was it, like 51-5 or something?
Yeah.
And they had, I think the regional was like Holy Cross, Yale was a 3 seed, like Nebraska was a 2. I mean, that's really the only time I've ever seen a team get an outrageously just cakewalk regional. So I think outside of the 4th seed, I think a number 1 seed could get as tough as a regional as a number 9 seed.
One more for you, Kendall, before we let you go on NCAA
Sure.
tournaments. Like in 17, Arkansas had as true of a regional as you could ever have. That year, ORU came over from Tulsa, Missouri State came from Springfield, and Oklahoma State came from Stillwater. None of those schools were more than 200 miles away from Fayetteville. But then in 18, it expanded out a little bit more. What was it? It was Southern Miss and Dallas Baptist. I think ORU came back over for that year too. And then in 19, you had a couple of teams come from 1,000 miles away. Central Connecticut was here. California was here. What is the thought process within the selection committee when they're putting? I know you said that they try to keep it as regional as possible, but you get some weird years where Arkansas goes to Tempe for a regional, or it never seems like it's the same one year to the other.
Yeah, no, you're right. And, the reason why I kind of lean towards geography this year is just the COVID stuff. Like, I think if they can, I think they're just going to try to keep teams closer to home. That's why we kind of have Nebraska there this week. If you look at Nebraska, they've got a really good shot to win that conference. And if they win that conference, I just don't think they're going to send them, very far away. And as strange as it sounds, Fayetteville's like the closest possible regional for them. So I think that would make a lot of sense. But you're right. I mean, it kind of just ebbs and flows from year to year. And, we'll see what this committee prefers. I mean, I would personally, for me, like a team like Arkansas, if you've earned the number 1 overall national seed, to me, you should get a pretty easy regional. Now, I wouldn't guarantee you an easy super, but your regional should be pretty easy.
Yeah, I think Arkansas fans have been to Nebraska enough that, Omaha, Lincoln, that's about the same as driving to Dallas or Fort Worth from here, and they're used to that. What other teams outside of Nebraska do you think are a chance to come to Arkansas? Last question for you.
Yeah, I mean, Oklahoma State is an option. I mean, Oklahoma State could be another team that if NCAA wanted to get even closer geography-wise, you could send Oklahoma State there. ORU would be a good 4th seed. The problem with that is I think they're too good of a 4th seed. I don't know if I see them going there because I think they're actually a pretty good team. They took 2 or 3 from LSU earlier this year. Mm-hmm. So I think the fact they did that probably keeps them from going to Fayetteville. And so I would say if you're Arkansas, you're probably getting like a Northeast Conference or MEAC or SWAC 4 seed, and you're probably getting 2 teams from kind of the general area for your 2 and 3 seeds.
No Fairfield as a 4 seed.
You get Fairfield as a 3. I mean, think about Fairfield is they'll probably be a 3. And that would be a perfect place to send them because let's be honest, I don't think they're that good.
Right.
But that would be a really cool storyline with them going to Arkansas.
Yeah. All right. Well, Kendall, we appreciate you taking time for us on this busy day for you.
You got it, brother. Y'all be good.
Our thanks to Kendall Rogers for coming on from D1Baseball.com. When we come back, we're going to look back at the Tennessee series, and we'll take a look forward to the Florida series a little bit later with Jeff Cardozo of the Florida Radio Network. This is the WholeHog Baseball Podcast presented by Massage Envy.
WholeHogSports.com has the largest, most experienced staff of reporters covering sports in Arkansas. Football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. You'll find it at WholeHogSports.com. The website includes up-to-minute news, daily commentaries, and award-winning photography from the staffs of Hogs Illustrated and the Democrat Gazette. For subscriptions, call 1-800-757-6277. That's 1-800-757-6277. Or visit us online today. WholeHogSports.com.
Massage Envy with clinics in Rogers and Fayetteville has been awarded Northwest Arkansas's Best Day Spa and Best Massage. One of the reasons is our care for athletes, both serious and recreational. We now offer rapid tension relief sessions using a high-caliber vibrating tool and total body stretch sessions like the ones used by the PGA. Both of these new services can be combined with the always popular deep muscle treatment. So whether you compete or just want to relax, there is no place better than Massage Envy. Welcome back to the WholeHog Baseball Podcast, presented by Massage Envy.
There aren't many times that you have a highly anticipated series in baseball, or even go to any other sports. A big basketball game or a big football game, and it really lives up to the hype. I thought the Arkansas-Tennessee series lived up to the hype last week in Knoxville. Arkansas won 2 of 3. All 3 of those games were one-run games, and in my opinion, Seth, it's not only the best series this year, but it is the best series I can remember that Arkansas has played in quite a few years.
Yeah, I agree. The quality of play on the field in Knoxville was just fantastic. And then you also got to think about, this is the first time that Tennessee opened up their capacity to 100%. Mm-hmm. This was the first time that Arkansas not the first time, but the first time that they traveled to Tennessee in a while. And all these things adding up made for just a fantastic series. And Arkansas got tested with some things throughout this series. They had some adversity, which this team has handled really well all year long, but to bounce back in that first game after giving up so many runs in the first, and then, just to continue to play baseball and continue to, I just said baseball, I meant top-rated baseball, and continue to just find ways to win series is really astonishing at this point, Matt. It's you never really realize what you got till it's gone kind of thing. But what Arkansas Razorback baseball is doing right now is just needs to be appreciated.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. It's, I always think back to whenever, the basketball team was in the Final Four so many times in the 1990s. They went in 90, they won it in 94, lost in the championship game in 95. Who would have thought, sitting in Seattle that night in 1995, that the program's not going to be back to the Final Four within the next 30 years?
Yeah, not me.
Or close to it.
Of course, I wasn't born yet, but yeah, not me.
Yeah, so you got to appreciate this type of run of success while you can. And it's not just this year. I've said for probably about 4 or 5 years now, I think we're kind of in the golden age of Razorback baseball. Who knows how long that golden age is going to last? Maybe it's a deal like LSU where it's a multi-decade type deal, or maybe it's fleeting. It doesn't last for very long. I think you definitely have to appreciate it. Going back to what I was talking about earlier, though, to me, I was kind of racking my brain all week about what was the last time I could think of Arkansas having a series that was this good. And what I kept coming back to was the 2017 regional, when they played Missouri State 3 times in Fayetteville. That was the year that they played the 3 a.m. game in the rain, and Jared Gates hit the home run, and Keith Gutton got all, huffy and puffy in the press conference. But those were 3 really, really good games. And all 3 of those games, like these games this week, were one-run games. In 17, Arkansas lost in game 1 5-4, won 11-10 in game 2, and lost game 3 3-2. And those games weren't quite as back and forth as the Tennessee games were. I don't think Arkansas ever had the lead in the first game, and they may have not had the lead in the second game. I can't remember for sure. And then, of course, game 2, that game in the rain, that was like a ping pong match. It was back and forth, for about 4 or 5 hours. And it's kind of interesting, in that 17 game, Tony Vitello was the hitting coach at Arkansas, and Nate Thompson was the hitting coach at Missouri State. And so a lot of these coaches who were on the field, Josh Elander, who's a hitting coach now for Tennessee, he was Arkansas's volunteer coach. Luke Bonfield, who's doing some stuff for Tennessee right now, he was on that team for the Razorbacks. So there were a lot of the same characters on the field in that 17 regional as were on the field over in Tennessee this weekend. But what made this series stand out to me was the fact that in all 3 games, both teams led. In game 1, Tennessee took the big lead. Arkansas comes back and wins 6-5. Game 2, Tennessee gets off to a good start again. Arkansas has the lead, gives up the walk-off home run. And then game 3, just like game 1, the lead wasn't as big to come back from, but Arkansas came back and won in the late innings. And I just can't think of a whole lot of series that have been like that. Again, Tennessee surpassed my expectations. They really did. Tennessee has always been a program that I have thought kind of is fool's gold in the non-conference. They win a lot of games. Like they were 16-1 in non-conference last year. We don't know what they would have been like in conference play, but you think about 19, I think they had a really good, non-conference portion, and then they got to conference play. They did well, really well for Tennessee standards, but this year it's just been different. They were lights out in non-conference, and they are a really good team. The team that left Knoxville, or the team that won in Knoxville, was going to be in the SEC lead, and Tennessee was pitched 2 pitches away from potentially having the SEC lead going into the final weekend. That's a team that, and then they're still in the race. Arkansas's got a tough game this week against Florida, or a tough series. Tennessee goes to South Carolina. That's not going to be a cakewalk either. But Tennessee, if they're a worthy SEC championship team, I guess is what I'm getting at. And I was really impressed with how they played.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the right word, but just their moxie in coming back from Arkansas and taking every punch that Arkansas gave them and coming back and punching back really showed that they are one of the top teams. And honestly, they have the potential to be there every year that Tony Vitello is there. Yeah. They are going to be a force to be reckoned with, which just adds. So you have all the normal teams that are going to be there in the SEC baseball. Now you just added another team in Tennessee. So now you still have the Floridas that are going to be good year in and year out. You still have Vanderbilt that's going to be good. Georgia is normally pretty good. And then now you added Tennessee over there in the West. And don't forget, South Carolina that went to back-to-back national championships and won 2 of them. And then on the other side, you got Arkansas and Mississippi State, Mississippi, LSU is going to turn it around because they're LSU. Like the SEC is not going to get any easier. It's just going to get harder. And so the fact that Arkansas is accomplishing what they're accomplishing is huge. And you could just tell, I think you mentioned it on the podcast last week, Matt, but the Tennessee fan base was hungry for somebody to win something. Mm-hmm. They opened up to full capacity, like I said earlier. And, they don't have a very big stadium. I think it was over 4,000, right?
About 4,500.
But they were packed out, they were loud, and they were ready, and they were cheering on. And I have a disdain for turf baseball fields, Matt, and they were cheering on their team on that turf baseball field. I can get into that later, but yeah, you wouldn't play basketball on a carpet gym, would you? You
No.
can.
Actually, I can remember when I was in junior high, we played, I can't remember where it was, but we played on a court that was not actually hardwood. It was like a rubber. And it was like, don't dive for loose balls because you'll leave your skin on the court.
I've played on a carpet court before. I've played on a plastic court before. But anyway, you wouldn't play high-level college basketball on those courts. Well, you don't play high-level college baseball on carpet.
Yeah,
but that's neither here nor there, and that's their opinion and whatever. But I don't like that. But anyway, the Tennessee fan base showed up and were hungry, and it really was just back and forth, tensions running high even towards there at the end. But it was a great series and just entertaining from a fan's perspective.
And now let's talk about that, the Van Horn-Vitello flare-up that they had at the end of the game. It's kind of interesting to me that in the last couple of years, I've heard this from a lot of places, that people just kind of assume Tony Vitello was the heir apparent at Arkansas for whenever Dave Van Horn retires. I've never been all in on that, and I don't think that this affects that one way or the other, but I've never really been all in on that for a couple of reasons. Number one, there's no guarantee that Tony Vitello is still going to be at Tennessee whenever that time comes that Arkansas's job comes open. And I still think we're 5 years or more away from that, ever happening. Dave Van Horn's 60 years old. He's in great shape. I think he likes coaching. Now, he has made the comment before, like when they played Mike Martin in Florida State in Omaha a couple of years ago. He said, when I'm 75, I'm not going to be coaching college baseball. And I've had discussions with Dave before. After they went to the World Series in 2018, the Democrat Gazette named Dave the Arkansas Sportsman of the Year. And so I sat down and did a real long feature story on him about what he had done that year. And I asked him, I said, do you ever think about retirement? And he had just signed a new contract for 5 years that had the option for 2 additional years. He said, well, I think I'm still 5 to 7 years away from retirement at minimum, basically saying I'm going to coach through this contract and we'll see where we're going. But back to Vitello, I've never been full in on thinking that he was this heir apparent at Arkansas. we don't know where he's going to be. I think he's going to have a ton of options at the end of this season.
Oh, yeah.
There are a lot of people who think the LSU job is going to come open. There are people who think the A&M job might come open. And, that either of those jobs might be better jobs than Tennessee. And there may be other jobs that come open. We don't know what will happen. But also, if you look at like Oklahoma football and Ohio State football, and I think Gonzaga did this when they promoted Mark Few after their coach left several years ago. There are a lot of examples of championship-type programs promoting from within and never really missing a beat, right? I mean, look at what Lincoln Riley's done at OU or Ryan Day's done at Ohio State. Chris Peterson did this at Boise State when Dan Hawkins left for Colorado a number of years ago. So I think that Tony was at Arkansas. Let me say this. I think that in the Van Horn era, there is a line of demarcation almost, and it's 2016. There was the Van Horn era before 2016, and there's the Van Horn era since 2016. And there's no doubt that the program has taken a massive step since 16. This was a program that you always thought maybe could get to Omaha, but like during the regular season, if they were ranked, it was always like, 14, 18, 20, 22, something like that. And ever since then, it's been a team that's been pretty much in the top 10 just about every week. There have been a few times where they've slipped out of it, but not very often. And so, Vitello, I think that he gets a lot of credit for helping assemble those teams that did so well in 18 and 19, and even, players like Casey Opitz and Kevin Kopps. There are some players that I think he had a hand in helping recruit. But I think that he hasn't really been part of the program since maybe there's been a culture change over the last few years. And so I don't know that it would be just this shoe-in, for him to become the coach. Now, as far as what happened on the field, I mean, think about your best friend. And I'm not saying Dave and Tony are best friends, but think about somebody you know well. Isn't it easier to snap at them, right?
Yep.
And then you're in the heat of the moment. You've just lost a big series, or you're won a big series. You've been through a really, kind of emotional few days. And so I kind of chalk that up to the heat of the moment. I really don't think a whole lot more of it than that.
Yeah, I don't think that interaction had any more or less effect on Tony Vitello getting an Arkansas job.
Well, and maybe I want to piggyback on that. I don't think it should have any negative. I don't feel like anybody should have negative feelings toward Tony for having a lapse in judgment, as he put it, basically saying that I brought up something off the field, that it wasn't the best time. It wasn't the best timing to bring something like that up. I mean, this is still a coach who I know this. A lot of the Arkansas players still love Tony Vitello. And there's a lot of them who might not be at Arkansas if he hadn't have helped recruit them and built that relationship that, at least initially got them interested in the program. And so, anybody who's got a negative feeling toward Tony Vitello right now, I think that's misguided. I think that's misplaced. I think that, you just had a couple of guys who knew each other pretty well, and they just had a little flare up, and that happens between people who know each other well.
And then what we didn't see on TV that was reported by other people is the fact that both Dave and Tony, after that initial flare up that was happening when the teams were shaking hands, they had another conversation
off to the side. Yeah.
That was longer afterwards. And I think that's one of those moments where cooler heads prevailed a little bit. They weren't sitting there with Dave yelling at Tony and Tony yelling through his mask. And so I think that's something that we don't see at first and foremost. But also, just going back to the Tony Vitello job situation, job search, you're exactly right, Matt. You're not going to run Dave Van Horn off. You're never going to do that. That would just be the most idiotic thing that Arkansas has ever done. And so when that time comes, who knows where Tony Vitello is going to be in his career? Yeah. He could easily, if he stays at Tennessee, they invest a lot of money in his contract and in facilities. He could easily be the top team in the SEC then. So why would he leave to go to Arkansas? He
may flame out by that point. He may go to a program with high expectations and he's never able to quite reach them.
Yeah, what if he goes to LSU and then all of a sudden he can't get LSU past the regional round? All these things happen. And so first and foremost, to put that thought out of your mind like that, I think that's still a ways away, like you were saying, Matt. And then second, no matter what was happening with this flare-up, even if suddenly Van Horn, I think Van Horn is going to maybe have a little bit of say in who is his successor. But also, when it comes down to it, Arkansas, as an athletic program, they care about winning. I mean, every athletic program does. And if Tony Vitello was the best option to win, then he would probably be one of the first ones that they approached for that job.
One thing I think is for certain, whenever the job comes open, I think it will be someone who has ties to Van Horn and to the way that things are done at Arkansas. The same way that whenever Norm DeBryan retired, it was Dave Van Horn who had ties to DeBryan and knew the way, that his program worked. I just think that there's it's something that has worked too well for too long at Arkansas to try to go out, try to reinvent the wheel. You want to bring in somebody who has, who has seen firsthand how things work around here, and who's able to move that on. Moving on, the Tennessee series, just some things that stood out to me, Seth. Speaking of Dave Van Horn, by the way, he passed Ray Tanner this week for 5th on the SEC's all-time wins list. And I'd been sitting on this for a little bit. I actually got this graphic from the SEC 2 years ago when Arkansas played Ole Miss in the Super Regional. And what I wanted to know then was how many times had Arkansas it was where did Van Horn and Bianco rank among the SEC's winningest coaches? And then through that, I'm the one who found that graphic or found that stat about, they had met so many times. And at that point, I think there were like 2 or 3 meetings behind Ron Polk and Skip Bertman. But what happened is that, at that point, I think Dave Van Horn had like 687 wins or something like that. And he was behind, I think, 8 coaches at that point. I think he might have been 8th on the list. And so he passed Rod Delmonico at the end of last season. Because of everything that was happening with COVID, I completely forgot that last win that he had last year, number 700, moved him past Rod Delmonico. So I was looking through that again whenever Bianco and Van Horn's teams met in April. And I was like, well, he's really close to, passing a couple of others. And so I sat on it last week. I almost reported it with Keith Madison in Kentucky, and I kind of forgot last week. And then I was thinking about it through the it was one of the things like I thought before the series, and then when the series was over, you get so wrapped up in everything that's actually happened on the field that I forgot, that he had passed Keith Madison on Sunday of the Georgia series. And so he passed Ray Tanner on this last Sunday when they beat Tennessee. So now he's 5th in the SEC in wins by an SEC head coach. Now that doesn't take into consideration what he did at Nebraska. It doesn't take into consideration what he did at Northwestern State. This is wins as an SEC head coach. Like Ray Tanner, I think he was at North Carolina State for a number of years before he went to South Carolina. The only people that are in front of him now are Ron Polk, who I don't think anybody's ever going to catch because he coached like 33 years, something like that, at Mississippi State and Georgia, mostly at State. Skip Bertman, who I think the 3 active coaches are going to catch. Skip Bertman's got 870 wins. You've got Bianco now, he's over 800. Corbin is in the 770s, 780s, somewhere in there. And then you've got Van Horn, who is at 739 wins. I think they might all catch Skip Bertman. But what's interesting to me is now you're talking about, of the 5 winningest head coaches in the SEC, 3 of them are active coaches, Bianco, Corbin, and Van Horn. And that is fascinating to me because you look around the rest of the league and look at all the volatility and the turnover within the coaching ranks. And so to have 3 who have been able to, withstand that for so long, I think is really interesting. And so I thought that was a real neat thing that Van Horn passed Ray Tanner last week. On the field, Tennessee, I thought Arkansas's defense stood out. I thought it was as good defensively as they have looked this year. I think they might have committed an error in game 2. Am I right? Maybe a couple of errors that it might have been, critical to that comeback. But, for the most part, I thought defensively they played really well. I've said this before this year, but I keep thinking it. They remind me of that LSU team from 14, 15, somewhere in there that had Alex Bregman and a lot of others who were really, really good defensive players. And, that team, I remember when they came to Fayetteville in 15, they were making plays, and it's like, are they ever not going to make a play that allows Arkansas to get back into this game? And that's kind of what I felt watching the Tennessee series the other day, Seth, especially in game 1. after Tennessee had taken the big 5-0 lead, it was like Arkansas made every big defensive play they had to. The play where Christian Franklin laid out in the outfield and made the catch, I thought that was the biggest play of the game, because if that ball gets down, not only does Tennessee score a run, they probably add at least one more run in the inning, because I think there were no or one out in the inning when he caught that, and that's probably a triple. And then you've got a sac fly opportunity to score another run. And I just think defensively this team, I think it gets overlooked a lot how good this team is defensively, because their fielding, it's good. It's toward the top of the SEC, but it's not like this eye-popping, 988 or 990 stat or something like that. It's 979, 980. But for the most part, they make just really, really good plays, especially when they get down in games. And that's been a key to them coming back in these games where they've gotten down real big.
Yeah, Christian Franklin's catch was ranked number 1 play of the week by NCAA Baseball. So everybody's taking notice for sure. But yeah, it saved multiple runs. I think you're exactly right. And it is kind of weird because you will have this team make errors every once in a while. I can't remember. I think it was in the midweek game where Jalen Battles just didn't field the ball towards the latter innings.
It just fell out of his gloves. He was trying to throw it to second base against Arkansas State.
So, you have those moments where there are lapses in judgment, but I still keep going back to the Louisiana Tech head coach saying, you have a professional shortstop playing for you right now, Van Horn. And some of the plays, he makes that you're like, okay, well, obviously a professional shortstop wouldn't have made that play. But then there are other plays that he does get to, and you're like, okay, yeah, that is a big league shortstop out there. And then you have Robert Moore, who I swear can track down any ball. Now, whether or not it's going to make it there first base is another question, but he can make over-the-shoulder catches. He can track down and make throws off of his back foot. So what the strong suit was coming into the season was up the middle with Franklin, Battles, Moore, and Opens.
Yep.
That's proven to be correct. And then you've gotten guys over at third base. You really feel comfortable with Smith or Nesbitt. Nesbitt is the quote-unquote defensive guy, but Smith has made so many plays over there that I don't have a problem with either one of those. Slavens is fit right in at first. Wallace seems to get more and more comfortable in right field every single game. And then whoever is playing left, Gregory or Webb, can easily play that position. So, yeah, the defense, there are no question marks anymore on the defensive side of the ball. And they do make good plays that save runs.
There's a lot of plays that I think, and you said it, that save runs. You'll see times where one of those middle infielders or even the third baseman will try to make a play, and, it won't be the best throw to first base. And Brady Slavens has gotten really good about being able to, pick those throws at first base and not letting them get away from him. Just little things like that. Little things about, hey, if a ball's too far in front of me, I'm not going to dive at it in the outfield and let it get past me and let a single become a triple. They're playing really smart defensively. I think Braden Webb had that great catch against the wall in the 9th inning the other night. I thought that was a great play. Defensively. And I also thought Colin Smith got credited for an error that shouldn't have been an error. I thought it should have been a base hit.
Yeah.
And that was one of 2 scoring decisions that I didn't think was right. There was a play in the comeback, I guess on Sunday or maybe it was Saturday. I can't remember. All the games kind of run together. Casey Opitz had a hit that knocked in a run, and they called it an error, and I didn't think that was the right call. But late innings, Arkansas continues to be really good. Their 2 wins this week. They scored their winning run in the 8th inning of both games, and it's the 11th time now, or Sunday was the 11th time this year that they've scored a go-ahead run in either the 8th, 9th, or 10th inning of a game. Just really incredible. You talk about the big comebacks, being down 3 runs and all this stuff, but that to me is just as impressive, because there have been some games where they've been down early, but then they've come back early too. I think about like the Murray State game. They were down 4-0, then they hit a 3-run home run. All of a sudden it's 4-3, and it's anybody's ball game. But they're really ripping teams hard out in the late innings, and I think that's the mark of a good team. I think good teams are the ones that are able to come back late, and they've certainly been able to do that. Roster moves, we talked about this before we started the podcast, Seth. I thought, bringing in Charlie Welch for a pinch hit. He got the hit in one of those games. I said I think we ought to call him Charlie Pinch. I think he's something like 4 for 7 or 4 for 8 now this year in pinch hit opportunities. Been really, really good. Braden Webb, the decision to play him on Saturday, I thought paid off. Dave Van Horn, before the game Saturday, told Phil Elson on the pregame radio show that they just felt like Webb, even though his batting average isn't good, he's the type that can get them double when they need it or a home run when they need it. And I think he said this, that because of the way the wind was blowing that day, they felt like maybe, having a right-hander was the right play right there at that position. And lo and behold, he hits the 2-run home run that, begins their comeback after, they've been no hit for 5 innings. And, I thought Zebulon Vermillion, bringing Vermillion in. Now, of course, they had to bring Vermillion in because Monk couldn't get a strike, but they brought Vermillion in, and I thought that was a real big play in Sunday's game, being able to get out of a bases loaded, 1-out jam against the number 2 and 3 hitters in the Tennessee lineup and only give up 1 run. That was a huge, huge moment in that game. Big-time damage control by Zebulon Vermillion.
Is Vermillion the guy you bring in when you need a ground ball double play?
I think he's one of them. I think Caden Monk is one of them. Monk can do it, even though Monk may be more of a strikeout type. The guy that I think that may induce double plays as well as anybody, and maybe I'm completely off base in saying this, but I think I've seen it a couple of times this year, is Evan Taylor. And now that may be a matchup deal. You may only want to bring him in against a left-hander. I'm not quite sure what the play is there, but I feel like on more than one occasion they brought him in and he's gotten a double play for them this year, which is kind of interesting because he hadn't pitched just a whole lot. But I think Monk is a guy. Monk seems to me like he pitches a lot better the first time than he does the second time. Like if you rest Caden Monk for 2 days and you bring him out the second day, it doesn't seem like it goes nearly as well as it does the first day with him. So yeah, I don't know exactly what the right answer is there. But I thought they made a lot of really good roster moves. Of course, the roster move everybody's going to nitpick and criticize is bringing in Jackson Wiggins for the 9th inning of Saturday's game. I thought that was some tough luck for him to put the base runners on because, of course, there was that, what would you call it, a flare, a bloop off the end of the bat. Nobody knew where it was going to fall. And so they get a leadoff base runner that way. He made a couple of really good pitches to Liam Spence, who coming into the series, by the way, Spence was the number 1 hitter in the SEC. He made a couple of really good, I thought, 2-2 or 3-2 pitches to Spence that Spence was able to foul off and then, was able to draw a walk. And then, of course, they brought up Max Ferguson. He swings away and he wins the game for him. And people are, well, why do you leave Wiggins in that situation? Well, for as much as Wiggins has had his ups and downs, and I don't even know that he's had a whole lot of downs before the other day. Now, he's not been as consistent pitching in the SEC. He's not getting swings and misses like he was doing early in the season. But man, he's pitched in some big situations. He closed the Alabama game that won them Game 3 of that series. I think he closed Game 3 of the Mississippi State series and threw 2 innings, which, by the way, they brought him in against Mississippi State in the exact same situation as they did against Tennessee. The inning was different, but they were up by 2 runs. 2-run game against Tennessee, they bring him in. He got 3 big outs in the TCU game, which turned out to be one of their biggest wins they've had this year. And I don't know that the door is completely closed on bringing him in as a closer again. I think that was a moment where he just didn't get it done. But I don't know that that's necessarily a referendum on his ability to close at the end of the game.
I don't know. If I had a say, I would probably say that it is. But differing opinions. Correct me if I'm wrong. Sorry, I'm having trouble spitting this out. But when you are sitting there and you're focusing on trying to make this guy a starter, working up his pitch count, working up just how he can continue to build up stamina, and then all of a sudden you throw him out there, it didn't seem like to me that he was hitting the same speed that he was earlier in the season.
His velocity was definitely down.
So is that, and it could not be. This could just be me drawing connections where there's not. But could that be a possibility because they are trying to get more pitches out of him and making him a starter, or we're practicing him in that starter role to where he's not going to go out and throw 30 pitches that he can throw at 96 miles an hour, but instead he's got to throw 60 that he throws at 92 to 94.
I think his velocity has been going down all year.
And that could be it. I mean, he's a freshman. That happens to freshmen.
Yeah, I think he was hitting higher velocities early in the season than he has in SEC play. But I also think he's having to throw more pitches against SEC teams than he was having to. I mean, you think about like TCU, what did he throw? 11 pitches, 12 pitches to get out of an inning? I think there was one of those games where he threw 10 pitches to get 3 outs. He's having to go now into, whenever he's pitching an inning, he's going in now into the 20 and 30 pitches. Now, that doesn't mean that he can't keep his velocity up, but I wonder if his arm may be getting a little tired, which, can happen for freshmen.
Especially
like
they haven't played this many games ever. I mean, they play a high school season and then they go and play in a summer ball, but not in the same situation.
They're pitching in, bullpens in the midweek. They're pitching in scrimmages, between games. They're doing more than just – Jackson Wiggins didn't pitch between April 18th and the Arkansas State game last week, but it's not like he hadn't pitched since then. They're still getting live work for these guys. So, like I said, I think he's gotten it done in other games this year, in big games. The Mississippi State Game 3 win was as big of a win as they've had all season. The TCU game was a very big win for them. The Alabama win was a really big win for them. Them coming back to beat Alabama the way they did in that series opener after they lost, in the SEC opener after the way they lost the first game of the series, I thought that set a tone for them, the rest of the season. And so again, maybe I'm wrong. I just don't think the door is closed for him to come in and possibly close a game. Now,
I just think that there's a question mark now hanging over him, and you're not.
I don't disagree with that at all.
He's not the go-to. If Cops can't go in the last innings, he's not my automatic go-to now.
But who is?
Exactly. You have to find somebody that is, and that's the question mark for this Arkansas baseball team.
Right. I think if a Caden Monk is pitching, if he hadn't pitched, maybe you throw him. Maybe you throw a Ryan Costu if he hasn't pitched. I thought Costu pitched really well up until they brought Wiggins. He pitched well for 4 outs the other day. But the book on him has been once he gets past about 4 or 5 outs, it's gone south for him in a hurry. So one more thought before we get out of here is on Kevin Kopps. Or how about we do this? We'll talk about Kevin Kopps after the break on the week ahead, because we're going to talk about him with Jeff Cardozo of the Florida Radio Network. So we'll talk about Kopps on the week ahead here in just a moment. This is the WholeHog Baseball Podcast presented by Massage Envy.
Massage Envy with clinics in Rogers and Fayetteville has been awarded Northwest Arkansas's Best Day Spa and Best Massage. One of the reasons is our care for athletes, both serious and recreational. We now offer rapid tension relief sessions using a high-caliber vibrating tool and total body stretch sessions like the ones used by the PGA. Both of these new services can be combined with the always popular deep muscle treatment. So whether you compete or just want to relax, there is no place better than Massage Envy. Want more coverage of your home team? Download the WholeHog Sports Video on Demand app. Check out the Fan Zone and get up-to-the-minute videos, podcasts, and features on football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. Search for WholeHog Sports on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire at home. And take it with you on the go by downloading it for your mobile device in your app store. The WholeHog Sports Video on Demand app. Get it today. Welcome back to the WholeHog Baseball Podcast. Let's take a look at the week ahead, presented by Grease Pig.
Arkansas and Florida play this weekend. The SEC championship is on the line. Lots of scenarios, and we're going to break down scenarios after we talk with Jeff Cardozo here in just a few minutes. But there's a lot of scenarios that the Razorbacks can win the SEC, either splitting the championship or winning outright. And like it is, a lot of times after we get past game one, everything will come a lot better into view. There's a chance Arkansas could win a share of the championship Thursday night. If Arkansas beats Florida on Thursday night and Tennessee were to lose the opening game at South Carolina on Thursday night, then Arkansas would clinch at least a share of the SEC championship. Arkansas hasn't won a regular season SEC championship, by the way, since 2004. They split it with Georgia that year. In 1999, they won the championship outright. Again, or 1999, they won it outright by going 22-8 that season. The week ahead is brought to you by the Grease Pig. For 20 years, they have specialized in serving UA students, faculty, and staff with 2 locations in Fayetteville on College Avenue and Martin Luther King Boulevard. The Grease Pig has experience for all your repair needs, including tires and alignment at their location on College Avenue. Grease Pig is a proud sponsor of the week ahead. Before we get to Jeff Cardozo with the Florida Radio Network, just to finish a thought from our last segment, Seth was giving me time cue saying we needed to hit a break. So I just want to finish this thought on Kevin Kopps. We touched on this last week, how I think he could be the player of the year. And so earlier this week is when our first ballots for the Dick Hauser Trophy were due. And like I said last week, I'm going to put him on my ballot. Well, I did. I put him number one. Put him number one on my ballot. May not mean anything. He may not make it. I think a relief pitcher winning National Player of the Year is really rare. I think a relief pitcher winning any type of MVP award is really rare. I was talking to Bob Holt about this. I think he said when the Tigers won the World Series in 1984, their reliever that year was the AL MVP. But I mean, how many times?
Of course,
going
Bob
back,
would know that.
I mean, go back through MLB history. How many times has a reliever actually won MVP? Did Trevor Hoffman do it when the Padres won the pennant?
I can't remember. There was a lot of talk about him and his changeup.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only other guy I can think of that might have possibly done it, and there may be some others. But again, whether at any level of baseball, for a reliever to be recognized as the best player in the country, NCAA if you're in college, Major League Baseball if you're in the pros, it just doesn't seem, like that's going to happen very much. But going back to Kopps, I wanted to go back after he pitched against Tennessee 6 2/3 innings last week and just look at what he's done in Arkansas's biggest games this year. And so how do you quantify biggest games? Well, what I did is I looked at the teams that the NCAA announced last week are in the running to host a regional. So there's 20 teams in the running to host a regional. Arkansas has played a ton of those teams. And Kopps this year pitched one time against Texas Tech, TCU, Louisiana Tech, and Mississippi State. And then he pitched twice against Ole Miss, South Carolina, and Tennessee. All of those teams, 7 teams there, are in the running to be one of the regional hosts. Against those teams, 10 games that Kopps pitched in, 26 2/3 innings. In 26 2/3 innings against the best teams in college baseball, he gave up 2 runs. One of those, by the way, was against Texas Tech on opening night when I didn't think he pitched very well. 43 strikeouts in 26 2/3 innings and 8 walks. Those are incredible numbers. And so it's not like Kevin is putting up these numbers against SEMO, Murray State, not to take anything away from those teams because I think those are good teams, but he's putting those numbers up against the best teams in the country. And then in addition to those games, Seth, I mean, I could go back and look at the 3 1/3 innings that he pitched against Alabama. I thought that was a huge outing in a game. I think that was scoreless whenever he came in. Or the 3 times that he pitched against Auburn. I mean, think about what it is against Auburn and how that Auburn series went and how important it was for Arkansas to win that. If they would have lost that series to Auburn, I don't think you'd be talking about Arkansas being the number 1 team in the country right now. I don't think you'd be talking about them being the number 1 national seed in the NCAA tournament right now. And so, I mean, I've said this, you run out of things to say about Kopps, but what he's doing is just, I think it's just incredible.
Yeah, without a doubt. We've run out of words, and so I'm not going to sit here and make up words, although I feel like Kevin Kopps' performance almost deserves made up words. But it is. The reason why Arkansas is the number 1 team in the country is because they haven't lost an SEC series. They haven't lost a series all year long. And that's what you can point to, and it's because of Kevin Kopps. I mean, not 100%, but when you have a guy that can come in the 7th, 8th, or 9th inning and do what he's doing, without a doubt, an MVP, at least of the Arkansas baseball team, but should probably be considered for more than that.
I want to give him credit. Keith Grayson is someone, he's a Razorback fan. I met him in Phoenix a number of years ago at a Razorback club out there whenever I was covering a baseball series when Arkansas was playing. And he tweeted last week, he said, I watch Kevin Kopps like I used to watch Darren McFadden. You have to realize how great this dude is in real time. He's unreal. And I thought that was a really good comparison. And in the National Player of the Year, conversation, of course, McFadden in football was the runner-up in the Heisman Trophy a couple of times. I think it's a great comparison, though, Seth. I mean, think about when McFadden was playing. You knew on any given snap that the ball was going to be in one of two players' hands, right? It was either going to be in Darren McFadden's hands or in Felix Jones' hands. And then when McFadden had it, 9.5 times out of 10, he was going to run it. Every now and then he would, drop back and throw a pass to Peyton Hillis going down the seam. But for the most part, a defense knew that it was either going to be McFadden that had it or it was going to be Felix Jones who had the ball, right? And you just had to pick, okay, which one are we going to focus on this time and hope you get it right. Isn't that kind of what you're doing whenever you're facing Kevin Kopps in the batter's box? I mean, it's either going to be the cutter, slider, or it's going to be the two-seam fastball. And you just kind of have to choose and hope that you get it right. And even if you do get it right, there's no guarantee that you're going to, be able to make a play on it. I think it's a great comparison to McFadden. And, to me, Kopps is as deserving of a National Player of the Year award as Benintendi was in 2015, if not more deserving. Because as good as Benintendi was that year, I don't know that I would say he was just overpowering, dominant, almost a fearful aura about himself like Kopps has. Right? I mean,
yeah.
I think batters are legitimately nervous when they get in the box against Kevin Kopps because he has created just such a what's the word I'm looking for? Reputation for himself this year.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Without a doubt. I like I said, I can't make up any more words, and that's a fantastic comparison.
So I've got him on my National Player of the Year ballot. This is the first, I think, of 3 ballots that we'll put in, and but I think I'll die on that hill defending Kevin Kopps for National Player of the Year. All right, let's go to the phones. Jeff Cardozo is the color analyst for the Florida Radio Network. He'll be in Fayetteville this weekend when the Razorbacks play the Gators, and he joins us now. Jeff, we appreciate you taking some time for us.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's hard to believe we're on the last one. I guess it's been a long year, but a short year, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, baseball season always flies by, I think maybe faster than any other season. A lot of focus here is that Arkansas has got a chance to win the SEC championship this week. They come in with a 1-game lead coming into the series, but Florida, they're not out of the race. This is a real big series for the Gators too, not only from the championship perspective, but Florida, they're in the still in the hunt for hosting a regional, possibly in a top 8 seed. Real big weekend for the Gators.
Yeah, no, I think that's what it is. It's hard to believe, but it seems like always every year it comes down to this last weekend, and these two teams just happen to be playing each other. And I think obviously looking forward to it. Our guys too, anxious to see if they can go on the road and do something that nobody else has done all year. It's been pretty special to watch Arkansas from afar and know that they've won every single series, so that makes it tougher on our part. Yeah, I think that's the mindset. I think that's where even for Kevin O'Sullivan, he wants to see, okay, you're going to have to beat teams like this if you're going to get to the ultimate goal, and that's, of course, back to Omaha and trying to win it again. So that's what's really important about all this. And you look at how they're going about it, just trying to have the mindset of, okay, let's go get the first one. It's that take it game at a time kind of thing. But like you said, I think the regionals are pretty much a lock unless, God forbid, Florida got swept or something. But, if you go in and take 2 out of 3 from a team that hasn't lost a series yet, then I think Florida's right there on the verge of maybe getting one of those top 8 national seeds. And we're such a different team at home, so that would be huge on Florida's end.
I think there's even a scenario where both teams could leave happy this week, that Florida could win the East and Arkansas could win the West and the conference. Yeah. So it's interesting how this is going to work out. As I've watched Florida this year, number 1 preseason, consensus number 1, kind of got out of the gates a little rocky with the Miami loss. Really maybe didn't hit your stride until maybe week 6, 7. It seems to me, we always talk about Kevin Kopps at Arkansas. Maybe the big move for Florida was to move Jack Leftwich to the bullpen. Seems like since that point, things have been looking up for the Gators.
You're right. No, it's been a huge difference, and it's been a really weird year. I think we were so good last year, and just about everybody came back. So you're thinking, all right, well, Florida's going to be really good again. But they had 2 guys in the bullpen that ended up being lost for Tommy Johns, and that was probably the 2 top arms. Had another guy that was lights out last year, and he can't get anybody out this year. It's a really weird situation, and I just don't know why he just can't do that this year. So he's now a non-factor. So I think Sully tried a lot of guys early that he thought would fit in roles that would be okay, and then they haven't worked out there. So I think the bullpen has been the biggest question mark. So, yeah, you're trying to figure out what to do. And, he had a guy in Alimon that blew that Miami game like you were talking about, but he was more so a starter. They were trying to make him the closer because the other guys that were lost. So he's kind of flipped those roles. And, I think he's figured out now, okay, Alimon can do this. And then for Leftwich, if he just goes and throws his lights out stuff for an inning or two, then he's really more valuable pitching in 2 or 3 games on the weekend as opposed to just one. And, that's been it for him. So I think that's been one difference there. And then defensively, it's just really weird. All the teams that we've had that have gotten to Omaha and have been really good, the defense has been really good. And, they're making a lot of errors, and it hasn't been as much late, but they're not getting to the non-routine balls. I think we field balls pretty good, but, I think you see baseball all the time. You have the shortstop that can go up the middle and make a nice play, or go in the hole and make a nice play, or the second baseman that dives for a ball and takes the base hit away. We just don't seem to do that. So you're giving up more hits. Pitchers are throwing more pitches, and it's just you don't have those 3 facets of the game that I think it takes to be really good. But they figured it out. They've moved guys around position wise. They've done some different things, and you're right. The last 3 or 4 weeks have been really, I think, the team that we thought we'd see at the beginning of the year.
For Leftwich, you've got to kind of check your ego at the door. You're expected to be this high end SEC starter, and now you're in the back end. But as like we said with Cops and with Leftwich, and like we've seen with some other guys across the SEC this year, that's a really valuable position if you can have a guy go all in as a back end closer type, because that's where you can get your heart broken a lot of time. I wonder what you've seen though from him going back to checking your ego at the door and really doing something that helps the team out.
Yeah, it's weird. We went to Knoxville right after the switch happened, and I just don't think he was there mentally yet. And Sully brought him in the game. It was a high leverage situation about the 6th inning, and Florida had the lead, and he threw 8 pitches, all balls. They weren't even close to the strike zone. And, you guys just witnessed it, but you got those knuckleheads from Tennessee just to the right of the dugout cursing and yelling and screaming, and they affected Jack, and I don't think he was ready for it. So he got pulled out of the game there. The next time out against Auburn, he had a really bad outing. And then really since then, he's been lights out. He's been really good at home, not so much on the road, but then he finally goes to Kentucky. And I think it just took time to mentally have himself in the right place, because I think that's what it was. He's feeling he got demoted. But then, you can think about it. It's almost maybe when you're showing the scouts, okay, I've already shown that I can start. Now I can be used in a different role. I still got some pretty nasty stuff. I'm throwing 95, 96 with this wipeout slider. Then, that might be, okay, well, a scout might say, okay, well, we can now figure out once we get him, but we want to get him now. So maybe he's even been more valuable from that standpoint. But it definitely took a couple of weeks to get this thing going.
Florida comes in this weekend. They've won 5 series in a row. The Tennessee series was the last one. The Gators lost, swept Missouri, then won 2 of 3 over Auburn, Vanderbilt, Kentucky, and Georgia. I watched some of the Vanderbilt games. That felt like a really big weekend for that program.
Yeah, it was huge. And the relationship that Sully and Corbin have from being assistants at Clemson together is always, it always makes for some chirpiness. So it makes for a lot of fun. But for some reason, despite as good as Vandy's been all over the years, Florida's really handled them well. And I don't know if that's the Sully factor or not. But I think being at home certainly helped too. I just think the guys were ready for it, and they got kind of hit in the mouth a little bit that first night. They actually hit Rocker pretty well, but then we didn't pitch it all that well, so they ended up winning. And then they came out against Leftwich and just kept hitting homers off of them, and that gave them some confidence. Ended up winning that day, and then Barco pitched really well in the game. So he's been a really big factor too. Barco's been lights out in kind of that back end thing. They've moved him to Saturday, and I think we'll see that again this weekend. So it just goes back to finding the roles, figuring things out, and making sure that you're playing the right ball at the right time.
Let's talk about offensively for the Gators. Judd Fabian reminds me a lot of some of the Arkansas hitters we've seen this year, in that he doesn't hit for average particularly well, but you leave a ball over the plate and he's gonna smash it. I think he and Wes Clark are tied for the SEC home run lead coming into the weekend. He's got 16 home runs. Tell us about Fabian. What kind of season has he had, and maybe he got off to a little bit of a slow start.
He did. He's a special kid, though. But I think before the season started, people were talking about him being the number 1 overall pick. I mean, that's the hype that this kid was getting. And I think that was a little much on him. So we go back to that mental side of things. And he started off okay, but then once the SEC hit, he for some reason went through a little slump. He had 28 at bats, and he struck out in 16 of those 28 at bats. So you look at about the first 24 games or so, it was awful. I mean, he's hitting right around the Mendoza line, and then all of a sudden he changed his 2-strike approach, not nearly striking out as much. He's widened up his stance. He's hitting the ball the other way, and he's got power to all fields. So I think that's what really makes him special, because he has the ability to do that. The bats, like the swing speed is really, really good. So he gets a hold of the ball, and it's gone pretty much all the time. Even just the line drives he hits just gets through the infield really, really quick. So I think a lot of Arkansas fans will be impressed if, he can do something. I know they don't want him to do something, but, he can certainly be that guy. And once he started going, then the lineup took shape. He was hitting in the 2-hole when he was so bad, they dropped him down and demoted him down in the 6-hole, and sometimes even hit 7 a couple of games. And now he's back in the 3-hole, and he's kind of the heart and soul of the middle part of that order. So it's been good. And it's not only that, defensively, he runs down so many balls. And we've had 4 or 5 big league outfielders since I've been broadcasting Gator baseball, and he might be right there up with the best of them. He just really easy strides, rundowns, a lot of balls, has a really nice arm. He's your prototypical 5-tool guy, and I think that's why so many scouts have really loved him and kind of been enamored with him all year, and he's kind of bringing himself back into the middle part of that first round.
You played for Florida, right?
I did. I was a pitcher in the late 90s.
I wanted to preface it with this, or preface this with the fact that you played. It seems to me that some of the hitters, whether it be Fabian or some of these guys at Arkansas, like Robert Moore or Christian Franklin, the hitters that we thought were going to have really big years in the conference, they're putting up good power numbers, and you look at OPS, those numbers are pretty good. But from a batting average perspective, they're not great numbers. And as I look at the top of the league, I see a lot of freshman guys like Trey Morgan at LSU and Dylan Cruz at LSU, Jake Rucker at Tennessee. Do you think there's something to pitchers figuring out hitters and being able to pitch them better as they get later into their career?
Yeah, no, I certainly think that. But then I also look at what's happening in Major League Baseball, and I mean, we saw the first month of the Major League season, the overall batting average was 231 from those guys, and I think once now you start to become draft eligible, maybe late in your sophomore season or now of course junior seasons, then you have scouts saying, we don't care if you get base hits, we don't care what your batting average is, we want this launch angle again, we want to see the velocity off the bat, we want to see all these types of things. And I think that the guys kind of get infatuated with that, and they're saying, okay, well, if these big league guys don't care, then why do I care? I just want to put up numbers, and I'm going to hit the ball over the fence every single time that I have the opportunity to. So I think it's really a factor for both sides, and because it'd be a fascinating study to see now if Dylan Cruz in a couple of years all of a sudden can't hit anymore, and whether or not it's because people know that he can't hit a slider down and away, or you can pitch him inside under the hands, different things like that. Or if it's just, all of a sudden now the power numbers are much more because that's what he wants to showcase to the next level, because that's what those guys are looking for.
What have been your impressions of watching Arkansas from afar?
Really good. That lineup is pretty special. Of course, lights out. I'm a little scared that if we don't have the lead after 6 or 7, then you got to see that guy at the end of the game, and then you don't really have a chance. So I think that's going to be the goal for Florida to try to get up early and see if they can sustain that. But we don't sacrifice. We've got 3 sacrifice bunts all year, so I think it's just going to be one of those. Again in the SEC, try to run in some balls, hit some balls in the gap, and we don't run a ton either. But it's a really good hitting group from our side, and I think that's what I see from Arkansas's side too. It's just, especially, we've only got 5 or 6 guys, it seems like, that you can really trust out of the bullpen. So I think the starters need to go deep in the game in order for us to be successful this weekend. So, I think that's the goal for Arkansas on that side, to be able to do some stuff. I think pitching wise, we'll be able to, hopefully handle some of those guys. It doesn't seem like the starting pitching's been all that great, but and that's normally the MO for those guys over there.
You mentioned Cops, or you referenced him. You've seen Rocker, you've seen Leiter. Those kind of seem like the top 2 starting pitchers, at least in the league this year. And you think about national awards, we had this discussion last week that for a relief pitcher to win, like the Dick Howser Trophy or the Golden Spikes, it feels like it would be an offensive lineman winning the Heisman
Sure.
Trophy. It's something that just doesn't happen. But I mean, as you look at Kopps and what he's meant to this team, and I'm interested to get your perspective on this because you're not as close to the program and watch him so close. What are your thoughts about him as maybe it fits into that National Player of the Year or even an SEC Pitcher of the Year race?
Yeah, I mean, just to factor into so many games to not only have the saves, but to keep Arkansas in it, to allow them to come back late. I think 9-0 or something. So I mean, just you think about all those things that he's just kind of been the rock of that staff. And I think it's a fascinating discussion because we've talked about this on the radio shows I do back home. Just about what an MVP is and who that is, and the position that they play and how you go about it, or how much they factor into each single play, and certainly the opportunity that he has to be a factor into so many different games. I think that's got to mean a lot. And, Rocker's good and Leiter's certainly good, but I think from afar, knowing the impact that he's made on that team, I feel like if you take him away from that team, then Arkansas is not nearly as good. And I think if you take away those two Vandy guys, then they've still got some arms out of the bullpen that probably would get a lot of people out, and their offense is good and they'd win a lot of games still. But it just seems like without that guy, that Arkansas wouldn't be the same type of team. So he would have my vote. And I haven't even seen him yet, but I started thinking about that and looking about that a couple of weeks ago. And I said, gosh, if I was one of those guys that had the vote, he would certainly get mine.
All right. Well, Jeff, we appreciate your time.
Yep, my pleasure, guys. Looking forward to this weekend. I know it's going to be a fun group. Those guys will be yelling and screaming. We don't get there often, so I'm anxious to get back there again.
Our thanks to Jeff Cardozo for joining us. Arkansas and Florida this weekend. Big series at Baum-Walker Stadium. Of course, Arkansas is going to open up to 100% capacity this weekend. First time all year that it's been at 100%. Although, if you ask the coaches who were at the Arkansas-Georgia series a couple of weeks ago, both of them will tell you that there were a lot more people there than whatever was announced. I think it was like 7,400, 7,700, something like that for those games. I mean, it looked like there were 10,000 people in the stadium for all three of those games. It did not look like 2/3 capacity, which is what they said it was going to be. 100% capacity for Arkansas and Florida. Big games this weekend. The games on Thursday and Friday are going to be televised by SEC Network. As of right now, I believe that Saturday's game is going to be on SEC Network Plus, but I think there's a flex schedule in place where the SEC Network could pivot to that game if they wanted to. And then I seem to remember, Seth, that the SEC, maybe on the last day of the regular season, they do some sort of whip around coverage where, they just basically go to, the big moments in the different games. On Thursday, the game is going to be at 6. On Friday, it's at 7. On Saturday, it's at 2. Thursday and Friday's games will be Dave Neal and Kyle Peterson on the call on the SEC Network. And as of right now, I think Saturday will be Brett Dolan and Troy Eklund. But that could be subject to change. And, of course, it's a lot easier to change things now because announcers aren't on site. And so, they can pivot to a different game quite easily because they're just calling the games from monitors in their living rooms, in their offices, wherever the case may be. We had Clay Matvick on here several weeks ago. I was talking to him about where he calls games from, and he said that because he lives in basically the middle of the woods in Minnesota, he doesn't get very good internet access. And so he but he's renting office space in the nearest town that's like a 10-minute drive from his house. And so whenever he goes and calls the games, he's actually going into this, I guess like an office park or something, going in and he's just created a little, just a little backdrop right there. And that's where he sits and calls the games. And then he finishes and he drives home in 10 minutes.
A broadcasting studio almost.
Yeah. And I think that there's going to be a lot more of that after COVID. ESPN was already toying with this before the pandemic, having announcers call games remotely. I think you're going to see a lot more of that moving forward. But Arkansas and Florida, like we said, those 3 games. Let's talk about the weather for a minute, Seth. The weather does not look good Thursday night. Right now, the National Weather Service says there's a 50% chance of showers and thunderstorms in Fayetteville Thursday night. That should clear out by Friday. Friday night should be mostly cloudy. Saturday, sunny. And then here's where it gets interesting. I've written about this before. There is an obscure rule in the SEC rulebook that says that on the final weekend of the regular season, and only on the final weekend, a series can be extended to a fourth game if weather permits, games are being played basically on Saturday, which isn't going to be the case here, but it could be the place elsewhere in the SEC. We'll just for kicks, we'll talk about this for a minute. It could be the case elsewhere in the SEC. And if one of the games that can't be played would have a direct outcome on an SEC championship, a division championship, or obviously, anything on those, any type of seeding for the SEC tournament, the game could be extended to Sunday. Now, I don't think that's going to come into play this weekend, because I think what would happen is that if they cannot play Thursday, they would probably set a Friday doubleheader. And then they would play a game Saturday. Because if you play a game Saturday, it has to be 2 7-inning doubleheaders. And I don't think anybody wants a division race, conference race, something like that, coming down to 7-inning games if they can, avoid it at all cost. So that's something that might come into play this weekend if the forecast changes at all. I don't think it's going to be the case. But it could be the case elsewhere in the SEC as those storms, move further east.
Yeah, it could be an interesting weekend across the Southeastern Conference. Just a fun little rule that you can impress your friends at the party with this weekend. Yeah,
exactly. The standings going into the final weekend, we mentioned Arkansas has got a 1-game lead in the conference, 1-game lead over Tennessee. Arkansas is a game and a half ahead of Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's kind of an interesting case because they didn't get to play that finale against Alabama. And so if they finish tied with somebody, then it would not tied, but if they were to finish with the same number of wins as somebody else, then it would come down to win percentage. And because they would probably be tied with a team that has played 30 SEC games and Vanderbilt has only played 29 SEC games, then Vanderbilt would finish higher in the win percentage. Vanderbilt could still tie Arkansas, by the way. I mean, they're 2 wins back, but Vandy plays Kentucky this weekend. And we mentioned this, Seth, all the teams who are in the hunt for the title this weekend, Arkansas's easily got the toughest matchup against Florida. The other games this weekend, Tennessee is at South Carolina. That's a tough one. I mean, that's not going to be an easy one for Tennessee. Vanderbilt home against Kentucky. Mississippi State goes to Alabama, and I believe Alabama's going to throw Connor Prelup this weekend. And so, given how Mississippi State played against Missouri last week, I mean, we all thought that we'd be going into the final week maybe with Mississippi State tied or in the lead in the West, depending on how that series went. If Arkansas would have lost at Tennessee and Mississippi State would have swept Missouri, they would have had the lead in the SEC West. And, of course, things couldn't have gone better for Arkansas last week. They won their series. Vanderbilt lost its series. Mississippi State lost its series. And who was the other one? There's one other team.
Tennessee lost to Arkansas.
Oh, of course, yeah. Tennessee lost to Arkansas. There you go. And so, their 3 chief challengers lost their series last week while Arkansas won theirs. So one win this week would clinch at least a share of the West for Arkansas. And Van Horn has said that's their number one focus this weekend is to win the West. Because in the West, you play everybody. In the East, you don't play everybody. And so it's a little bit off balance the way the overall crown is determined. But then I believe if Arkansas wins Thursday, if they're able to play that game, and Tennessee were to lose Thursday night to South Carolina, that would clinch at least a share of the title for Arkansas because that would be their 20th SEC win, and Tennessee would be the only team. Well, they wouldn't be the only team, but nobody else could get more than 20 wins.
Correct.
And so that would give Arkansas at least a share of the conference title, assuming that Vanderbilt doesn't have 20 wins, and then you get into that weird win percentage deal, and I guess that's still in play.
They're going to run out of room on that wall out in.
Well, not around the conference championships. Arkansas's only won 4 conference championships.
Yes.
Would you believe that? I mean, they didn't join a conference until the mid-1970s. They were an unaffiliated independent program when Norm DeBryan became their head coach. And then somewhere around 1974, 75, they became a member of the Southwest Conference for baseball, won the SWC in 89, won it in 90, and then they've won the SEC twice in 99 and 2004. So this is kind of, I think it's kind of exciting watching this team because, it's been 17 years since they won a conference championship. And I was thinking about that yesterday. The Arkansas-Texas game time came out for September 11th. September 11th will be the 17-year anniversary of the last time Texas came to Arkansas. That was the same year. Think about how long ago that feels. That was the same year Arkansas won its last baseball SEC championship.
Wow. Okay. You kind of left me speechless there for a second. That is a long time.
Vince Young and Matt Jones were still playing college quarterback.
This team is, done a lot of good things. And I think it's important to note as well that Van Horn said when he thinks back, at his time at Nebraska, his team went to back-to-back trips to Omaha, which was really cool. But he said that one of the major accomplishments was the fact that they won the Big 12 and they beat teams like Texas, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, because they played all of those teams. They had to be consistent throughout the entire year. He said that you can go on runs and that would mean that you can get hot at the right time, win 5 games, go to Omaha. That happens to teams, but to be consistent throughout the entire year, he's really proud of that, what his teams did in Nebraska, what his team in 2004 did, and what this team is doing and has the potential to do.
And to win the West. I think winning the West is really a notable achievement when you look at the other teams in the West. I mean, look at what Mississippi State and Ole Miss have done. And LSU, again, they're not having a great year, but that's no slouch program. A&M, kind of the same boat as LSU. This would be the 7th time that Arkansas has won the Western Division if they can close that out this weekend. I feel like closing out the West it feels like that is going to happen this weekend. Winning the overall race, we'll see. But I think they'll close out the West. Florida is an interesting team to me because they've got all the talent in the world. And we see this so many times from Florida. They're just so inconsistent. I don't know what you chalk that up to. I have a hard time saying they're poorly coached because I think Kevin O'Sullivan's a good coach. Maybe they have such a collection of great individual players that it's difficult to get them to buy into a team concept. I don't know. But Florida, it's this way all the time. You look at all the talent that Florida's had over the last 10, 12 years. Wouldn't you think they've won more national championships than anybody else?
Right.
They've won one. Yeah. And, they've had so many teams that were so good. A lot of teams got into Omaha, but, in Omaha, they just haven't been a real great program. I think they've gotten to the finals twice. Lost to South Carolina in 11, and they beat LSU in 17. That's it.
Speaking of inconsistencies, Matt, what do you make of the starting rotation for Arkansas this weekend?
Yeah, that was just announced not too long ago. As we're recording, the podcast, the Razorbacks are going to start Patrick Wicklander on Thursday, and they're going to start Caleb Bolden on Friday. They won't name a starter for Game 3. That is not a surprise to me. Before Game 3 of the Tennessee series, I think Van Horn said on the radio that Bolden had earned his way into the rotation. He didn't say starting rotation, but he said rotation. And so when he said that, I thought, whoa, does he mean that he's going to start? And as you started thinking about it, Bolden has given them consistency for the most part when he starts. Now, he doesn't go deep into games, but I don't think they expect him to go deep into games. I think they think of Caleb Bolden as the type that if he can get 4 scoreless innings or, 4 quality innings, that's good enough, and let's go to the bullpen. And to me, Paulette seems like the type who has thrown better out of the bullpen this year. You remember the game against Mississippi State? I think it was Game 1. Patrick Wicklander threw 5 innings, and Paulette came in and threw the final 4. And, against Auburn the following week, I think he threw 4 1/3 innings where he gave up 1 run. And so that's not to say that he hasn't been good in starts. I think he's had some good starts. The A&M game was a really good start for him. And I think he's had some starts where it went well for about, 5 innings and maybe fell apart on him in the 6th or something. But we talked about this, Seth, earlier. Who's your closer if you can't get Kevin Kopps into the game? Well, Peyton Paulette has shown against, some good teams that he can come in at the back end of the games and shut it down. That's what he did against Mississippi State. And so I think personally, I think he pitches better as a relief pitcher. I've heard pitchers talk about how sometimes they just feel like they're better equipped to be a reliever. And I'm not saying this is the case with Paulette, but this is what I've heard pitchers say. It's like when you start, you sit there and you have 6 days to think about that start. And sometimes it can get overwhelming, as opposed to when you relieve, you're sent to the bullpen and you may be in the game in 10 minutes. You just kind of have to react. And so, some pitchers are made better for that reactionary type pitching. I don't know if that's the case with Paulette, but, if you look at his numbers, he's been a better reliever this year than he's been a starter. Definitely more effective.
Dream scenario for Arkansas is Patrick Quicklander takes care of business. You may have to use one other person to get to Cops on a Friday night.
I think dream scenario.
Game. And then your dream scenario is that you throw Bolden and Paulette both. I mean, you might want to keep them, but if you can just throw Bolden and Paulette, then you're sitting good because you don't have to throw Cops again until Sunday, and you're not worried about who is going to come in when it could be just Peyton Paulette pitching for 5 innings.
I think dream scenario would be Patrick Quicklander goes 6 or 7 innings, and Kevin Cops comes in at some point in the 7th or the 8th on Friday night. And then on Saturday, maybe you can, 3-man it. Maybe Bolden gives you 3 or 4 innings. Maybe Caden Monk comes in and gives you a couple innings, and maybe Peyton Paulette closes it out. And I think I think it's gonna be all hands on deck in game 2 if they win game 1. Maybe it's that way even if they don't win game 1. I could see Lyle Lockhart coming into the game if they feel like there's a matchup that's going to be advantageous for him. I think they're going to go all out to try to win this thing as quick and as quickly as they possibly can.
I think it's important game 1 to win that game, because then you set yourself up. You put all the pressure on the other teams in the league that all of these if scenarios go into effect if you win.
Mm-hmm.
And Van Horn said that this team can take care of their own business and their own destiny if they win the series, but you can take a lot of pressure off by winning the first 2 games of the series and then just not even have to really you worry about it, but you can just relax more so on that Saturday game.
I started this thought earlier. My brain trailed off to I don't know where, but I don't think Florida's invincible.
Yeah.
You look over their last few weeks, they swept Missouri, but since then they lost at Kentucky, and they didn't play very well against Kentucky. And I think it might have been Jack Leftwich on the mound when they got walked off against Kentucky. And they also lost to Auburn. And so those are, 2 of the, bottom of the barrel teams in the SEC that they've lost to. And you heard Jeff Cardozo say it earlier. They have not been the best road team this year. They went to South Carolina. They got swept. Now, this year on the road, do you know what Florida's record is? 7-9. They're just 7-9 on the road. They're 28-7 at home. So this has not been a good road team. And this has been an Arkansas team that has been really difficult to beat at Baum, not only this year, but for a number of years. So it feels like it's a good matchup for the Razorbacks this weekend.
You could ask for worse. A lot of times, like you said, they end the season, or we said on the previous podcast, they end the season on the road. So
yeah,
you get to enjoy ending the season at home this year.
Yeah, I mean, we said it. It's the toughest matchup for any team that's in the SEC race. But again, look at what Arkansas's done this year. They've won 3 road series over top 5 teams. Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Tennessee.
Casual.
At the time. I mean, not to mention they won at Louisiana Tech, who's probably going to be hosting a regional. They won at South Carolina, who's in the running to host a regional. Okay, playing at home, that's got to be a lot more comfortable, especially if you're dealing with some rain delays, which they might be, this weekend. So the Razorbacks in Florida 3 times. We'll be back next week. We are going to do a little bit different next week. We will have a podcast that's available either late Tuesday or early Wednesday, and it will preview the SEC tournament. We will probably record that late Tuesday after we find out who the Razorbacks are going to play on Tuesday night. Or I should say Arkansas will play their first game in Hoover on Wednesday. We'll learn Tuesday night who they will play. And so we'll try to give you a little bit of a preview of the SEC tournament. I'm not a big fan of the SEC tournament. I think it's a real waste of a week, to be quite honest with you. I think that teams would be a lot better to play an 11th weekend series if they wanted to, or have do like the Big 12 does. The Big 12, they'll schedule some non-conference games toward the end of the year on some of these weekends. Like TCU just lost a series to Louisiana Monroe in Fort Worth.
Yeah.
They thought, okay, we're getting out of Big 12 play. Uh-oh, here comes ULM, and they beat them in a series in Fort Worth. But it's that would be, I think, I think that would be ideal, but I understand why they have the SEC tournament. It's a big moneymaker.
There's a
for
different
the conference
format, I think, that you could use.
Yeah. So we'll talk about all that next week, and we'll try to give as many scenarios as we can. And then the week after, we will have a podcast shortly, a reaction show to the NCAA tournament selections. Those selections will come out on Memorial Day. And so we'll kind of gather up our forces and try to figure out what we can real fast about the teams that are going to be coming to Fayetteville for the regional. So our thanks to Kendall Rogers of D1Baseball.com. Some big news that he broke today. We really appreciate him taking some time to join us, as well as Jeff Cardozo from the Florida Radio Network. Arkansas and Florida, three games this weekend. And as I said, we'll be back next week to preview the SEC tournament and recap this weekend's series against Florida. For Seth Campbell, I'm Matt Jones. We appreciate you joining us.
The proceeding has been a production of WholeHogSports.com. Look for our latest podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast store. And visit us anytime at WholeHogSports.com for the latest news and commentary.